Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here today. We're about to dive into a fascinating topic, the psychology of post-breakup nostalgia. On this first slide, you'll see the title, and I want to briefly let you know what we'll be exploring. We'll look at why ending a relationship isn't always straightforward, even when it feels right, and how those lingering feelings can affect us in the weeks and months afterward. So, let's get started and uncover the psychological nuances behind post-breakup nostalgia. Today, we're exploring what I like to call the weight of memory. As we navigate through our daily lives, we face more than just practical challenges like fixing the central heating or doing the shopping alone. We also encounter waves of memory that hit us unexpectedly. Sometimes, it's a sudden recollection of small, intimate rituals that once made our days brighter. For example, sharing a cheap bottle of wine by the sea, feeling the cold winter air while walking side by side with someone special, or simply putting groceries away together after a supermarket trip. These moments may seem small, but they carry a lot of emotional weight. They remind us of connection and intimacy that's now missing. And throughout this presentation, I want us to think about how these memories shape our experience of loss and longing, helping us understand the deeper impact of what we've lost. Let's take a moment to explore what I like to call the deceptive pull of nostalgia. At first glance, these memories can seem like clear evidence that we made a mistake in moving on. If those moments felt so tender, so meaningful, then why did we leave them behind in the first place? Why not just pick up the phone and try to rekindle that connection? To really understand this, we need to dig into the role that nostalgia plays in our minds. Nostalgia isn't just about reminiscing. It's a powerful emotional experience that can distort our perception of the past. It makes us see those moments as perfect, almost ideal, even if the reality was more complex. This is important because it shapes the way we view past relationships. Our memories can become a kind of emotional refuge, pulling us toward what feels comfortable and familiar. But the key takeaway here is that this nostalgic feeling can be misleading. It can mask the reasons we moved on and make us overvalue the past, potentially influencing our decisions in ways that aren't always rational. Understanding this helps us see how nostalgia influences our feelings and choices, which ties directly into the larger theme of how we manage our relationships and emotional well-being. Nostalgia, as we often experience it, is not just a simple memory of the past. It's actually a kind of psychological filter that shapes how we remember things. Instead of seeing the full complexity of past events, our minds tend to highlight the positive and sometimes ignore the darker or more difficult aspects. Think about 19th century artists who idealized the Middle Ages. They painted it as a time of innocence, simplicity, and strong community bonds. But in reality, that era also faced disease, hunger, and violence, things they chose to overlook in their romanticized portrayals. Similarly, when we look back on our own past relationships or experiences, we often do so through what I like to call rose-tinted glasses. We remember the good times more vividly and tend to forget the struggles or challenges we faced. This selective memory plays a big role in how nostalgia influences our perceptions today. It's a way our mind filters reality, emphasizing certain aspects while editing out others. And understanding this helps us see why nostalgia can sometimes distort our view of the past, connecting to the larger theme of how memory shapes our identity and emotions. Let's start by looking at how history often romanticizes the past, specifically in Britain during the Industrial Revolution. Many people imagine medieval life as this idyllic, harmonious, and pure time. But the truth is, this nostalgia often forgets why society moved forward in the first place. Progress wasn't just about leaving the old behind. It was driven by real problems that needed solving. Industrial Britain moved on because it needed to address issues like health, safety, and efficiency. Now, if we think about relationships, the same pattern shows up. We tend to remember the happy moments, the laughter on the sofa, the warmth of a kiss, more than the arguments or misunderstandings that can wear us down. Those frustrations, the repeated misunderstandings, they can quietly erode our connection over time. But what stays with us are the positive memories, the laughter, the intimacy. Connecting this to the overall theme, what I want us to see is that both in history and relationships, idealized memories often overshadow the challenges and complexities. Recognizing this helps us understand that progress, whether social or personal, often involves confronting and working through difficulties rather than just longing for a simpler past. Let's talk about the truth behind selective amnesia. Sometimes, we like to believe that our past relationships were simply perfect, that we were happy and then somehow lost it all through carelessness. But the reality is quite different. When our needs are truly met in a relationship, we don't feel the urge to leave. The fact that we do leave is actually a clear sign that there was pain, dissatisfaction, or incompatibility present. Even if, in moments of loneliness, those reasons seem to fade away or become less visible, the act of leaving itself is proof that something was wrong. It's important to recognize that we often forget or minimize the issues because it's uncomfortable to face them. This selective memory helps us avoid confronting difficult truths. Understanding this helps us see that the end of a relationship isn't just about a sudden change or a careless mistake. It's often a response to unmet needs and deeper dissatisfaction that we might prefer not to acknowledge. Connecting this to the overall theme, it reminds us that growth and healing come from honest reflection, not just nostalgia or selective memories. Now, let's explore why nostalgia tends to intensify after a breakup. First, there's the pain of independence. When we're newly single, suddenly we're facing all of life's challenges on our own, whether it's doing chores, eating alone, or waking up in an empty bed. These moments of vulnerability make us long for the comfort of companionship. In those times, our brains often turn to the past as a way to cope and find solace. Next, there's what I like to call the squeamish mind. Human memory is actually pretty selective. It's designed for our survival. It tends to avoid dwelling on negative events unless there's an immediate danger. This protective forgetting means that over time, we tend to remember the good parts of our connection, those sweet moments, while suppressing the bitterness that might have made leaving feel necessary in the first place. And finally, there's our fear of complexity. Accepting that we are complex beings with deep, evolving needs can be uncomfortable. It's often easier to imagine that simple joys could satisfy us, rather than confront the reality that we might be dissatisfied or that finding better solutions requires effort. All of these factors, our vulnerability, our selective memory, and our aversion to complexity, combine to make nostalgia after a breakup feel so powerful. It's a natural psychological response, a way our minds try to protect us from the discomfort of change. When facing doubt after a breakup, one of the most helpful guiding principles is the rule of maximal information. Essentially, it means that we should trust the decision we made when we had the most complete picture. At that time, we understood the full reality of the relationship, the conflicts, the disappointments, and the unmet needs. These are crucial because they informed our choice to leave. What often happens later is that our desire to go back is not based on that full understanding anymore. Instead, it's usually driven by emotional vulnerability, feelings of loneliness, or the mind's tendency to simplify the situation. So the key point here is to remember that our best decision was made when we had the most information. When doubts arise, it's helpful to reflect on that and recognize that the urge to return is often rooted in temporary feelings rather than the full reality we once knew. This principle helps us stay aligned with our original, well-informed choice, even when emotions are clouding our judgment. Moving forward, I want to talk about accepting our true nature. The solution isn't about trying to erase our needs or pretending we can be happy on very little. It's not about regressing into a nostalgic fantasy of the past either. Instead, the key is to acknowledge the complexity of who we are. We are quite difficult creatures, with constantly evolving emotional, physical, and psychological needs. And that's not a flaw, it's simply a truth of human nature. We also need to respect the good moments from our past without clinging to them. Yes, those joyful times were meaningful, but they weren't enough to sustain us indefinitely. Both realities, cherishing the past and accepting the present, can coexist peacefully. And finally, the most important part, commit to growth. The way forward isn't to go back or stay stuck. It's about developing new skills, skills like love, communication, and self-awareness, that can help us build deeper, more fulfilling connections in the future. This is how we truly move forward, embracing who we are and who we can become. As we come to the conclusion, I want to emphasize that feeling nostalgic after a breakup is completely normal, but it can also be misleading. Often, we perceive the past through a lens clouded by loneliness, which distorts reality. It's important to remember that just like history shows us progress comes from addressing real problems, our breakups remind us that the relationships we idealize in memory were not perfect. Instead of acting impulsively, like dialing an ex in a moment of weakness, we should trust our past judgment, respect our needs, and confront the complex emotions involved in love. True satisfaction doesn't come from romanticizing the past or clinging to what once was, but from developing the skill to love well in the present. So, as we move forward, let's focus on learning from our experiences and building healthier, more genuine connections now. That's how we find fulfillment and peace.